Thank you, Senator Little. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. As a servant to the people of Queensland and Australia, I have concerns about this bill. We can hear the cheers of joy from the research rent seekers. This bill includes a huge $400 million grant program over 4 years to add to the nearly $4 billion a year the government already spends on research. Now, research is important. I know that myself. In the past, Australia has led the world on innovation. Yet I'm not convinced that the government deserves the credit for our countrymen and women's inventions. Research is not just about money. And I'm not convinced that a huge, centralised, bloated federal government splashing huge amounts of cash is going to supercharge our economy. Science grants have already been responsible across science sectors for corrupting the science. We see that in climate, we see that in COVID, we see that in water management, many other areas. Money for advocacy on behalf of government ideology. That is what's plagued the CSIRO and turned it into a siphon for taxpayer funds, and in return the CSIRO is now corrupting the science and being an advocacy. Don't take my word for it, because I'm talking about senior research scientists who have retired from CSIRO saying exactly what I just said. CSIRO is now an advocacy group for the government ideology and policy. Not just the Labor Party, but the general policies that have been pushed by governments. The Australian Economic Accelerator has a focus on translating research to commercial outcomes. Sounds good. Has it occurred to anyone that the reason some of that research has not been translated to a commercial outcome might be because businesses have looked at the research and decided it's a terrible business idea? What if we're spending nearly $500 million here to flog dead horses, or giving taxpayer money to companies which would have commercialised the research anyway without grants because it's a good business idea? That's the point. In a free society, not corrupted by massive bloated government, merit determines what succeeds. These handouts for projects businesses would have undertaken anyway are corporate welfare. Or maybe they're corporate bribes. Only the big companies will get access to this corporate welfare. Small business misses out yet again. Only the huge corporates can hire the grant consultants, navigate the forests and weeds of more than 200 grants and scheme programs through which the government provides research funding and make the applications. The Department of Education confesses that most submissions to the University Research Commercialisation Action Plan, wow, that's a mouthful, University Research Commercialisation Action Plan, quote, agreed that there is no silver bullet solution to improving research commercialisation outcomes and that new reforms need to be integrated across the whole research commercialisation ecosystem. End of quote. Anyone reading between the lines on that bureaucrat's soup of buzzwords will realise that no one really knows if the Economic Accelerator will do much to achieve its supposed purpose. While we know that the biggest brake, B-R-A-K-E, on our country and particularly our country's innovation is big, bloated government, pushing on the brake and the accelerator at the same time. There's a big assumption underpinning this bill and research funding in Australia. It assumes that a big, bloated federal government with a bureaucrat sitting in Canberra enforcing grant guidelines will lead to innovation and commercial activity. Big assumption. If we want true innovation, and I think we all do, and a boost in commercial activity, government grants are a terrible way to do it. Government is the one standing in the way, and it's not just the Labor Greens government, it's the former Liberal National government. Government is the one standing in the way of innovation and commercial outcomes. Instead of grants, how about this? Get government policy focused on getting back to basics. Making electricity as cheap as humanly possible, number one. After government has spent decades blowing up the price of electricity with artificial subsidies that are destroying our electricity sector. And that ripples right through the economy. Every sector uses electricity, and once it's been made expensive, there goes the end of our competitive advantage that used to apply. Aluminium smelters now shutting down rather than coming because they can't afford the electricity. Number two, simplifying industrial relations so that instead of protecting the industrial relation club's members being large foreign and domestic corporates, unaccountable union bosses, lawyers, consultants, bureaucrats, exploiting workers, as I've discussed so many times, and suppressing small to medium-sized businesses, we need an industrial relations system that protects workers and enables small to medium enterprise to get on with the job of employing people. And thirdly, fixing the taxation system with its hideous complexity and its counterproductive behaviours that it drives. Fixing the taxation system with comprehensive reform so that multinationals pay their fair share of tax and relieve the burden on families and on Australian companies struggling under a high tax burden in times of severe inflation, adding yet another highly regressive government financial burden. Do these three things, Minister, and watch the commercialisation of research take off. The government will never have to make another grant. One Nation will not oppose this bill. Without proper reform of the important parts of our economy, though, research grants are just flogging a dead horse. And I will be returning to the topic of research grants lacking accountability, as is so widespread the case in our country. Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President.
Thank you, Senator Roberts.